I'm reporting here from Union Station, Kansas City, where we have the Union Pacific 844 back for another special public viewing. I have with me a special Senior Manager and Locomotive Engineer, Ed Dickens Jr. Ed, thank you so much for joining us again. We're so excited to have you all back. How does it feel for you and your team?
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. It's, as we say often, half the fun is getting there and half the fun is going back home. So it's always exciting to come into Kansas City. And last night, one of the special things for us is, I don't know what it was about last night, but the whistle was echoing all over. I think everybody knew we were coming back to Kansas City with the 844.
Yeah, we've had a lot of train fans that have highly anticipated your visit. Huge item to be here at Union Station, where so many trains came to this very spot. Do you all take that in consideration when you decide what stops on your tour to make?
Yeah, we do. Kansas City is a really nice place to display at the station here. It's a real nice place for the public to come down. From a historical standpoint, it's remarkable in that regard too. From a person that likes trains, most of us on the crew really enjoy the history of railroading. So it's fun to come in on the old routes, the former Missouri Pacific, the Katy, the Cotton Belt and other Rock Island and all the different routes in and out of Kansas City that are now part of the Union Pacific system. So that's always special for us. We refer to those routes by those names as we travel.
Well, I noticed that you have a steady line. We'll get out of the way for a moment just so the people can see, and it has been like this since early this morning. What kinds of things are people telling you as they're getting a peek inside?
Well, it's like this wherever you take a steam locomotive in the year 2016. Steam locomotives operating are very unique in this world. 20, 30 years ago, they were special. They're really special now just because they're so rare. Oftentimes, yesterday, for example, we stopped at Osawatomie and there was an elderly gentleman in his 90s, a former railroad locomotive engineer. And he was standing by himself right up next to the locomotive, and I went up and introduced myself, and he said with a crackly voice that he could hardly talk, that he was just overcome with the emotion of remembering his career on the railroad. And so we talked for a few minutes about the technical aspects of the locomotive. I asked him if it sounded familiar to him and if it smelled familiar, and he was almost speechless. And that's often the reaction we get from people that know about steam locomotives and experience them in their youth. And the younger children and people and the millennial generation, they've seen animated versions, cartoon depictions of locomotives. Well, this is no animation or no cartoon. This is a fully functional 450, nearly 5,000 horsepower locomotive, 450 tons. And when it's operating at speed and you're standing track side, you can feel it. You can hear the whistle blowing for a long ways out, and there's no mistaking, here it comes. And it's really special to see the excitement of the people. Whether we're traveling by slow or whether we're traveling by fast, the reaction is always one of just overwhelming awe that this machine even operates. And how in the world did they operate these back in those days? Because today's trains aren't as animated as this locomotive. They're fascinating in their own way, because of their power and the technology and the efficiency. But to see a locomotive, a steam locomotive operate, there's just something about that just captures people's imagination. And it's a fascinating piece of machinery to watch work.
Now, we've been talking to all of the train fans, but for people that maybe this is totally new for them, why is this UP844 so iconic? Something recently happened to it. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, to go back in its history, it's never been retired, and there's just a handful of locomotives in the world that can say that. Oftentimes a locomotive goes through its lifespan and it's an obsolete piece of machinery, and it's either scrapped or it's donated to a museum or some entity where it's placed on display. The 844 has not gone through that. It's been in active service since the day it was delivered in December of 1944. It began its life as a public relations ambassador in November of 1960, and this has been its role. It's very likely one of the most photographed pieces of machinery in the world. And when you figure out how many people show up to see it. We just got through a several-year refit where we worked on the boiler, and we worked mainly on the boiler aspects, a lot of piping. We found a few little problems with it, and the more we looked, the more problems we found. So we have to fix those problems so we can make the locomotive safe, and we can make it so it can continue to run. So that's what's special about this trip, because this is its first big trip since our big rework. It last operated in July of 2013, and we were out nearly 3 years doing that hard work. And I'm here to tell you, and the crew can attest, it's not easy work. Yeah. Because everything's specialized, and we have to make everything, and it's all manually fit together.
Now I have to ask one more question on a personal level. What does this mean to you?
Well, it's special to me personally, because at one time I was just like these young people walking around. I had an exposure very early in life with this particular locomotive, ironically. My father would take our family down in Denver in the early 1970s. And I was in awe, but I was also terrified. This is a big machine.
It's pretty big, yes.
It's a big machine. And but there was something about those experiences that I still remember. So I can relate. My foreman, for example, he's not even 30 years old. And he, as a young man, had in his bedroom a bumper sticker of the 4014 steam locomotive. And so we all have a connection to this type of equipment. We all enjoy railroading. This is our chosen career path. And to be able to operate the locomotive on this vast, wonderful network on the Union Pacific, and to be able to come to towns like Kansas City, where you can share it with people, I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Well, we're absolutely grateful that you all decided to stop here in Kansas City at the historic Union Station. Much, much appreciated. And to anybody who's watching this, if you don't have an opportunity to visit today, definitely stay tuned, because I understand you all will be back, correct?
Yep. We don't have any plans in stone right now, but Kansas City is a central location when we're traveling to and from. As I mentioned, we travel a lot with the locomotive. It's always, we look forward to coming to Kansas City.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ed.
You're welcome.
You heard it first. Reporting from Union Station, Kansas City, Lee Colbert.